Coming up on the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast, interesting perspective from another Sarc fighter.
And then
Wow.
The chest results came back, and there were 7 granulomas in my left lung.
Laura Ward suffered flare after flare, and the Sarc just kept on coming.
My husband and I went to a ball game at Yankee Stadium. We were walking up to our seats, and I just couldn't breathe. And I was like, this is kind of weird.
That interview is coming up.
This is the Sarc Fighter podcast, living with sarcoidosis and other rare diseases. Here's your host, John Carlin.
Hello and welcome. This is episode 70 of the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast. I'm your host, John Carlin. I do this podcast to offer fellow Sarc fighters hope and to help you connect with other Sarc patients, to hear their stories and understand how sarcoidosis affects their lives, and hopefully that helps you understand what you are up against and what you need to overcome, whether it is the disease or the effects of the medicine or both. But of course, whenever possible, I shine a light on the latest research to let you know what's going on that might make your life better. Maybe there's a new drug that is coming out or coming out soon, or maybe there's a better doctor. Whatever that is, we try to shine a light on it here on the Sarc Fighter podcast. And I can tell you that the news is brighter than ever, as there are more potential sarcoidosis-specific drugs in development now than at any point in the past. In fact, over the past year, with generous support from the community, FSR has made incredible progress in efforts to accelerate sarcoidosis research and to deliver responsive patient support programming. And so I want to tell you about spotlighting sarcoidosis to #MakeItVisible, FSR's 2022 update, which provides an inside look at the incredible progress that's been made in the last year, as well as upcoming initiatives in the sarcoidosis world. And so I would direct you to visit the FSR website and read that update and learn how your support can help stop sarcoidosis. And there are many ways that you can lend that support, and there will be a link to that Make It Visible update from FSR 2022 Spotlighting Sarcoidosis Make It Visible campaign. That's on their website, and I'll put a link in the show notes. Now, you may want to listen to the previous episode of the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast, because that's where Kinevant detailed their current efforts, which so far are looking quite promising. Kinevant working on a drug called namilumab. And if all goes well, you'll be hearing a lot about it in the coming months and hopefully longer. And they are actually recruiting now for a clinical trial. And that may be something you're interested in participating in. So if you want to go back and listen to episode 69 and you're looking for a dose of hope, all of the information is right there from my interview with the folks at Kinevant. And then I do want to invite you to become a leader in the sarcoidosis community by sharing your story, because FSR is now seeking dynamic and dedicated individuals who I think would be most of the people who listen to this podcast who are impacted by Sarc, because they want to ask you to, if you think you're up for it, to work alongside the newly launched FSR Global Sarcoidosis Clinic Alliance. And volunteers can now apply to become community outreach leaders who will then share their sarcoidosis story with the public to empower others and raise awareness, or apply to be a support group leader who would then facilitate in-person support group meetings at FSR Global Sarcoidosis Clinic Alliance member locations. And there are applications which are due September 30th of 2022, and you can learn more by visiting the FSR website, and I will put a link to that in the show notes as well. Now, on a personal note, and I like to share some of these occasionally, I had a weekend that I will never forget. If you're a regular listener, you know that one of the ways that I battle sarcoidosis is by staying healthy, and that I am a regular bike rider. I maintain my fitness that way. I was once a marathon runner, but because of complications from sarcoidosis, I can't run anymore, but I can ride my bike. And I had an opportunity this weekend to ride with 3-time Olympic gold medalist Kristen Armstrong. And let me tell you, that was a treat. I'm on the board of directors here locally for Visit Virginia's Blue Ridge, which is the Tourism and Convention Bureau, and our job is to get people to come to Roanoke and to enjoy their time here and basically to promote tourism in the region. And one of the things we're doing is we're promoting the outdoor brand for Roanoke, which is nestled in the mountains here of Southwest Virginia. We are a small city, but the Blue Ridge Parkway passes through here. We literally have hundreds of miles of bicycling trails and lots of rural roads, which the scenery is just gorgeous, and it's a great place to ride a bike or to come with your kayak or whatever. I'm getting on my tourism podium right now, but that's not my point. My point is that Kristen was here to speak at the annual dinner for Visit VBR, of which I was the MC, and I'm also doing a story for Channel 10, where I'm the news anchor here locally for the NBC affiliate, and so we made arrangements for me to go out and do some filming with Kristen, and I got to interview her, of course, but I also got to ride my bike with her as part of that filming, and it was just really a treat. She won gold medals in 3 separate Olympics as a cyclist, and is still an amazing cyclist and an amazing person. And you talk about people with type A personality. She describes herself as a type AAA. And I say this because I just posted a picture of Kristen and myself on my Sarc Fighter Instagram account. And I always post something going on with my life or my family. And I always post, keep fighting, because that's the reason we keep fighting, is so that we can live a meaningful life. And for me, that's most of the time family. I post a lot of pictures with my grandkids or my wife or my 3 grown sons. But I did just post a picture with Kristen, and if you'd like to take a look at it, then just go follow Sarc Fighter, the Sarc Fighter, with the word "the" in front of it, on Instagram, and you'll see the logo from this podcast there as maybe I should change it to a picture, but right now it's the logo. And you can see the picture of Kristen and me, and it was just a really neat thing. Now, also on a personal note, 2 episodes ago, I shared with you some of the thoughts of a man, an acquaintance who was dying of cancer, and he had been posting online some of his thoughts because it was one of those, he walked in to the doctor's office with a pain in his side, thought it was something, I don't know what he thought it was, but something that was fixable. And he walked out with a diagnosis of, you only have 6 weeks to live. And he was very coherent there in the very early part of that. And I felt his thoughts were especially poignant because he was such a deep thinker. He was extremely smart and became extremely philosophical during those days. And one of my takeaways was the value of living your days according to what you plan to do, which seems like such a gift when all of a sudden that's taken away because you don't have the strength or because there are more pressing matters such as medical care. And I shared that with you because I know that a lot of people with sarcoidosis don't have the energy even to get off the couch anymore. And so living our days according to our plans is really such a gift. I got up this morning and knew I would be working on this podcast and knew I'd be going to work, and if the weather holds, maybe I'll go for a bike ride later. And so you don't think of that as a gift, but when it's taken away, something that fundamental really is. And I also shared this particular person's thoughts because I know from published accounts and personal interaction that he literally had made more money than you or I could ever spend in 2 lifetimes by being a successful entrepreneur who ultimately sold his company to a corporate giant and then retired to spend his days enjoying life. And he was a family man. He was a good guy. And if you go back, you'll hear me talk a little bit more about it. So go back and listen to a couple of episodes ago. But I have to share with you that he passed away last week. So his life has come to an end, but his words and his thoughts will stay with me forever, and hopefully maybe with you, because we shared some of those thoughts here on the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast. All right, but coming up today, a true story of hope. I'll be talking with Sarc Fighter Laura Ward from Connecticut. She has had Sarc for about 3 years now. She had a terrible reaction to prednisone. Oh my, how surprising is that, right? He said with sarcasm. But they actually had to take her off of it. She's also a mother of 2 teenagers. She is a wife and works professionally in the public relations trade. And she tries to walk 100 miles a month, if you can imagine. But she eats right. For her, the fatigue is real. Her life has had to change a little bit, and she's had that journey that many of you will relate to through multiple doctors and multiple diagnoses, and then being diagnosed right before the pandemic. And all of that plays into her story. And so Laura Ward will be sharing her story, and I think you'll really enjoy it, coming up here next on the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast.
Zombie, just feeding and stumbling.
Hi, I hope you're enjoying the Sarc Fighter podcast. You may be wondering, what can I do to help? How can I be a part of the sarcoidosis solution? It's simple. Make a donation to KISS. Kick in to stop sarcoidosis. 100% of the money goes to the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research. Look for a link in the show notes of the Sarc Fighter podcast. Welcome back to the Sarc Fighter podcast. Joining me now from Connecticut, Avon, Connecticut, is Laura Ward, a fellow Sarc Fighter. Laura, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having me.
So you've been dealing with sarcoidosis for how long?
Just 3 years. I was diagnosed 3 years ago last week.
All right. Well, welcome to the party, so to speak.
Thanks.
And you have sent me some information, and we've chatted a little bit, so I know a little bit about your background. But first of all, why don't we just start out by you telling everybody how you knew something was wrong?
Sure. And it's an interesting story, but one that I realize is possibly not that uncommon, because I've heard others describe their journey similarly. In June 2019, I was sick with what I thought was kind of a late season flu and didn't really think much of it. I got better, except for this cough that kept lingering. My husband and I went to a ball game at Yankee Stadium. Our kids were both at sleepaway camp, so we took a day off, and we were walking up to our seats, and I just couldn't breathe. And I was like, this is kind of weird. Well, I was sick, so maybe I'm just not better enough yet. And by the end of the month, in June, my legs, both of them, from about the knees down into my toes, just blew up. They were so swollen. And nothing like that had ever happened to me before. Had no idea what it was. I had been in a place where I'd gotten a tick bite on June 30th, actually. And the swelling, I remember I noticed on July 1st. This was all kind of unfolding over the 4th of July weekend.
You were in Connecticut, which is like ground zero for Lyme disease.
Yes.
With ticks,
yes.
Right? Okay.
And that was the initial thinking when I went to the urgent care. I did have a tick bite and I had all this swelling. So they ran all the blood tests for Lyme disease and other tick-borne illnesses and put me on doxycycline. which is what you do if you suspect someone has Lyme disease. And we just kind of waited for all the blood work to come back. And I have a good friend who is an advanced practice registered nurse. And it was as I said, the 4th of July weekend, and I'm watching the blood tests pop into my little online patient portal. I'm looking at all these things. I have no idea what any of it means other than the fact that all the tick stuff was coming back negative. So no Lyme, which apparently doesn't show up right away. Anyway, it takes some time to show up from what I understand.
Yeah. And you didn't have the bullseye rash or any of the other stuff, right?
I had a little ring, but not a true bullseye.
Yeah. Okay.
So it was very faint, and faded quickly, faded very, very quickly. So I texted my friend and I said, she knew a little bit about what was going on. And I said, can you look at all this blood stuff for me and tell me what's going on? And everything, she's like, that's okay. And then there was one called the D dimer, which was elevated. And elevated D dimer can indicate the presence of blood clots somewhere in your body. And she said, go to the ER right now. So we did. And they were running all of the tests. I had ultrasounds of both legs to look for blood clots. And the one thing they kept saying is a blood clot isn't going to give you symmetrical swelling on both sides. It's going to affect one side or another, most likely.
Wherever the clot is.
Wherever it is, right.
Okay.
And they did a chest x-ray or actually, I think it was a chest CT. Or it may have even been both. I mean, they were running tons of tests.
Yeah.
And before the results even came back, one of the physicians on duty in the ER came in and talked to me. And, I'm not a thin individual. I've always carried around some extra weight. I've yo-yoed over the years with diets and whatnot. And so I was definitely not at my thinnest at this moment in time. And he came in and he said to me, well, women of a certain age who live a sedentary lifestyle, which was just like a knife to the heart because I walk a lot. Mm-hmm. I may be not the most skinny person there is, but I do walk quite a bit. Women of a certain age who live a sedentary lifestyle sometimes get this type of swelling in their legs, and you just need to go to CVS and buy some compression stockings, he told me. And then the chest results came back, and there were 7 granulomas in my left lung. And that doctor never came back into the room. His assistant referred me to infectious disease, which I thought was interesting because I didn't understand anything about what was going on.
Infectious disease, okay.
They discharged me and told me to follow up with infectious disease. And so, of course, I go home and what do? Dr. Google, right? What is this? I have all the results in my patient portal. I know all the words. I can look them up. So I started trying to figure out what all of this meant. And I looked at my husband and I said, I don't think I need to go to infectious disease. I think I should go to a pulmonologist. It's in my lungs.
Granulomas in your lungs, duh. Okay.
So I started doing some research and, was thinking potentially cancer. Maybe I need to find a pulmonologist who is at one of the facilities in our area that's really strong in terms of lung cancer. And I was asking my friend who's the nurse, and gosh, this was early July and people weren't seeing new patients until November, December. And then my nurse friend said, call this guy. Pulmonologist she knew and worked with, and he got me in right away, and he wanted to do a PET scan, and he also sent me to meet with a cardiothoracic surgeon who could do a lung biopsy. And so it took forever to get approvals from insurance on the PET scan. Once we had it done, it was, as he said, it lit up like Christmas. Highly illuminated areas that, again, would indicate that this was a cancer. And nobody had even said the word sarcoidosis.
Right.
So I didn't know what that was. And they scheduled me for the biopsy, which was by that point, September, very early September 2019. And when I woke up from being under anesthesia for the biopsy, the cardiothoracic surgeon looked at me and he said, so it's lymphoma, but it's early and you can totally beat this. You've got this.
Lymphoma.
And I said, yeah.
Wow.
So I was told right then and there, because I mean, he'd seen the granulomas, right? So
Right.
obviously he must know, I'm thinking.
But they hadn't tested him yet. He just
but no results back.
Okay.
So and then my follow-up appointment with the pulmonologist was for 5 days later, and kind of went home and filled in people in my life who need to know the latest update, and started doing more research on cancer centers. Where do I want to go for my cancer treatment? What am I doing? And I'm just trying to figure out as much as I can figure out before seeing the doctor again. And then I went in and he said, it's not cancer. And my jaw dropped open. Yay, great. It's not cancer. But what's going on? Because I still don't feel great. And I've got these granulomas in my lung. And he said, it's called sarcoidosis. And he kind of gave me a brief rundown on what it was. And he said, I need to put you on high dose prednisone. And so he did that. He prescribed, I think it was 80 milligrams of prednisone for the next 2 months. And he ordered blood work every few weeks just to kind of check and see how things were doing.
Yeah.
And the prior blood work had also indicated that my vitamin D was very low, that I was vitamin D deficient. And so he advised me to do a vitamin D supplement as well. So 80 milligrams of prednisone a day and a vitamin D supplement, and off I went. And, come back for a follow-up.
How'd you like that prednisone?
Oh, prednisone and I are not friends at all. The impact was quick, and I gained 40 pounds in those 2 months. And I actually developed a rash all over my face, which I now understand to be kind of a prednisone toxicity. So prednisone and I do not get along. I was tapered off the medication after we saw what my body was doing in response to it, and the fact that I actually felt worse on it, and it wasn't changing the granulomas. The swelling in my legs had actually mostly resolved at that point. So, have I had sarcoidosis for a long time and we just caught a flare at the end of this flu? If it was flu, I was never tested. Or, it's big question marks around all of that. Why did it present itself when it did? Who knows?
Yeah. Sounds like a flare,
Yeah. But what was interesting is that, so my younger sister she is my person. She is my rock. My husband's fabulous too, but my sister, there's something special between us.
Sure.
And she was doing a lot of research as well. And she found FSR within a couple of days of me saying the word sarcoidosis. And it just so happened they were having a patient day in Boston. And it was $10 or something. So we hopped in the car and we went up, and figured I have to learn all the things, right? Who knows what's going to happen with me? Who knows how this disease works? I really just didn't have a clue yet. And got to hear from some folks from the organization, as well as some physicians they'd brought in to talk about different areas of the body sarcoidosis impacts. And one of the patients, who was actually a board member at the time, I can't remember his name, but he described his journey to diagnosis very similarly to mine. And I said, "Ooh, cool. I'm not alone. This is great." It's always good to not feel alone. And then another patient came up to me and saw that I, saw my scar from my biopsy surgery. And she said, "Don't worry. it's going to fade really quickly and nobody will be able to see it. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't really care about the scar. I need to figure out what this disease might do to my body and what's happening on the inside that I can't see.
Right.
So one of the doctors who was there was from the Boston Sarcoidosis Clinic. I can't remember the exact name of it. And I thought, you know what? He knows more about this than my pulmonologist. I think I better make an appointment to go see him and just figure some of this stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time I was able to get to that appointment, I was, fully weight gained from my prednisone, looking really huge, and went to meet with him, and he reviewed all of my stuff. And it was interesting because he told me, you know what, this is going to go into remission all by itself. You really don't have to worry about a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what you need to do is drop this weight, and you should probably go have a breast reduction. And I was like, okay, that's kind of an interesting comment.
That is an interesting comment. Yeah. Okay.
And I was like, all right. And he said, you can follow up with me, or you can follow up with the pulmonologist you've been seeing at home. And I thought, okay, well, I'll figure that out. I'm not going to make a decision about that right now. It's just kind of, my head was spinning. So,
yeah.
So I left that appointment and continued working with my pulmonologist. And then the pandemic hit.
Okay. Right.
Because this was right. This is like November 2019, and then March 2020, COVID. And my pulmonologist actually stopped seeing patients in person.
Right.
And video visits are great. I think we've learned so much, right? Especially through the pandemic, about how useful these electronic video calls can be.
Sure.
But for me, not knowing what was going on with my lungs was really important to, have somebody listening to my breathing, knowing you can't do that in a video call.
Right.
And I thought, well, I need to find somebody who's still going to be seeing patients, because I need this for my peace of mind right now. This is all still so new to me.
Right. And how are you feeling at this point? So the pandemic is hitting, you've been diagnosed, you're on the prednisone, 80 milligrams, that's what I took. And that's about the highest I've heard anybody on the podcast describe. So how are you feeling? You're walking around self at this point?
My walking around self, I was running fevers a lot, not super high ones, but low grade fevers, more days than not, very achy, just body aches in my joints mostly. And not just my legs where the swelling had been, but wrists and elbows and shoulders and hips, and just very achy, super, super fatigued. Could that have been the stress of all of it? Maybe.
Yeah, no.
Is that sarcoidosis? Maybe.
That is a big symptom of sarcoidosis, the fatigue, because your body's just fighting it. Yeah.
And that's what shows up for me most often. Not as much anymore. I was actually told in April that I am in remission, which is super, super exciting because that's another piece of the story. But
so they took you off prednisone eventually because you had the rash, and so you're having this reaction to prednisone. So they took you off of it because it was doing more harm than good, right? So
yes.
So at that point, what happened? Did they put you on something else, or what happened then?
They didn't put me on something else. It was the doctors kind of wanting to just take a wait and see approach, and and let time tell us some things. I wasn't getting worse, but I wasn't getting better either. And so that was kind of okay, I guess. And then, as I said, the pandemic, and I wasn't able to see my doctor in person. And so you'll love this part. I posted on Facebook, hey, does anyone have a pulmonologist they would recommend? I need to find a new doctor. And, in the comments, people, why? I thought you loved your doctor. I do. My doctor's awesome, but he's not seeing patients right now in person. And I'd really love somebody to take a listen to my lungs and my heart and convince me that everything's going to be okay. And a friend of mine who, you and I talked about this before we started recording the interview, but I've been in public relations most of my professional career. And so a friend of mine who is a journalist for one of our local television affiliates here, reached out and she said, I'm actually doing a story on this about patients who can't see their doctors because of COVID. Can I interview you? And I'm used to finding the people to be the spokespeople and talk to the reporters and do all of that. I'm not usually the one being interviewed. And I said, okay, and we did it by video. And it aired, and it was a great piece. And I really just talked about how, for me, as somebody who's just learning about this disease, needing to have that face-to-face with my doctors is really important to me, and the stethoscope on my chest to listen to my lungs and all of that. And, just how much I wished that it could be different, and that for my own peace of mind, I might need to find somebody new. I'm guessing my doctor saw the piece that ran, because a couple of weeks later, I got a letter in the mail saying, best of luck to you with your new doctor.
Really?
Yes. And I
thought you were going to say
him.
that he said, oh, come on in. I'll make an exception and see. He said, no, was he just best of luck?
I hear you're looking for a new doctor. I wish you the very best of luck with your care. A message along those lines.
Wow.
And I hadn't named him. I didn't say anything that it could have.
Right. Because you're a PR
people know who he was.
You know that, right? Yes.
I wasn't looking to throw anybody under a bus. I was just telling my story because, I thought it was valid, and it's something that a lot of people are having to deal with, or were having to deal with in the beginning of the pandemic. Because I mean, and obviously I have no problem with people making personal decisions about their safety and what they're comfortable with when we're watching what COVID is doing, right? It was all still unfolding, and, nothing against him. I just needed something different for me.
Right. Interesting. So you found another doctor?
So I did. I actually, and I'm super excited. I'm working with both a cardiologist and a pulmonologist at Yale. So, and they are both fantastic. We've been keeping an eye on my heart. There's nothing going on with my heart. The vitamin D supplementation was interesting though, because there are two different vitamin D tests that can be run. And my doctor had only run one kind. And usually sarcoidosis patients have the other vitamin D test as well. And I forget the difference between the two of them, but they measure the vitamin D in two different ways. And one can show that you have a deficiency, but the other one can show that you are fine. So I was showing as having a deficiency, but I really didn't have a deficiency, because sarcoidosis patients can over metabolize vitamin D. So I think it shows up as not having enough, if I understand correctly.
Yeah.
I don't want to give out bad information.
Yeah. We've done some vitamin D related discussions before, and I still don't completely understand it, but you're right. There are two tests. And if you have sarcoidosis, that's the less common test that you need to look at. But they weren't doing it, right? They
weren't looking at that. Yeah. And so I was supplementing vitamin D, which was actually turning into calcium deposits. And I was throwing kidney stones.
Kidney stones?
Which I've never had in my life.
So now was related to the sarcoidosis or to a vitamin D supplement, or?
I think it was the vitamin D, because when I started exploring this and I stopped supplementing, I stopped having kidney issues.
Okay. All right.
But that was really, really interesting. So, I pay close attention to that now. And it doesn't seem to be something that's impacted by the vitamin D that I get through sunlight. But if I'm putting extra vitamin D into my body, within a couple of weeks, I'll throw a stone, which is wild. But my kidneys are otherwise fine.
Okay, well that's good. So
So,
let me get let's get you're looking for the new doctor. You're having trouble with the prednisone. He thinks it's just going to go into remission on its own, that's kind of a bold statement based upon what we know, because some people do and some people don't. And as far as I know, there's no way to tell just by looking at somebody whether it will go into remission. It's a 50-50 shot, really. There's half the people do and half the people don't. I didn't. So
right.
what happened next?
So I also started having trouble with my left eye. What's interesting is everything's on the left side of my body. The granulomas are in my left lung. The kidney stones were from my left kidney. And now this trouble with my left eye, flashers, floaters, just out of the blue. One morning I was working at my computer and I thought there was something on the computer screen. I called my husband in to take a look because we were both working from home at that point. And I was like, what is going on with my computer screen? And he goes, what do you mean? It's fine. And so then I start blinking one eye and the other, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's something going on with my left eye. I can't see. And I was so upset and walked away, went and sat down on the couch, closed my eyes, opened them back up after a few minutes. It was still going on. It's actually happening right now. It's constant. But just all of this, it's almost like I need to wipe my eye, but there's nothing in it. It's just all these floaty things all the time. And I ended up going into the eye doctor and he goes, I don't see signs of sarcoidosis in your eye, but that doesn't mean it's not coming because this could be the beginning of it. He said, the good news is usually the brain will retrain itself to not recognize all of this stuff that's going on in your eye. That was almost 2 years ago now. And my brain has not retrained itself. Wow. I guess my brain isn't good at that. But I see the eye doctor regularly and he's always looking for signs of sarcoidosis and he doesn't see it. But I feel like this has got to be somehow related. I don't know. It's the whole left side thing. It's weird.
Yeah. So I tell you, when something starts showing up on me, the first thing I say is it's sarcoidosis until someone tells me it's not.
Yes.
Right. And because there's so many manifestations of sarcoidosis, then you don't really know. It can pretty much create any situation that you could think of in your body. Like they thought you had cancer. No, it was sarcoidosis. And then they gave you the vitamin D, and then you have kidney stones. And at some point it's all sarcoidosis related, whether it's the treatment or whether it's the disease itself. But so now today, and you and I are speaking in September of 2022, you're not taking any medication. Is that correct?
That's correct. I'm not taking any medication. We actually thought in April this year that I was going to need to go back on something. I've been getting regular pulmonary function tests and had been doing really well with them. But in April, I didn't do very well on my pulmonary function test. And so in conversation with my pulmonologist, he said, you know what, let's get blood work. And he said, when was your last chest CT? And I said, it was a long time ago. I haven't had one in well over a year. He goes, okay, let's do that too. He said, I think, there might be some progression going on here because you're having more trouble breathing. And I had been noticing it on my walks as well. My pace was slower. I'm kind of crazy about my walking pace. I track it on my Apple Watch, and it's my walking pace to me, I think, is a big deal the way a runner's pace is to them.
I know that
because I don't run, but I really take my walking seriously. And a good month for me is about 100 miles. So
wow.
So we did the blood work and the chest CT, and we don't know why my breathing has been not as good as it could be, but the radiology tells us that my lungs look good. The granulomas have not increased in size, and one of them has actually shrunken slightly.
But the granulomas are still there.
They're still there.
They're still there, but
They're
you don't
not
have more.
huge.
Okay, and you don't have more of them.
No more. And one is getting smaller. The biggest one.
Why aren't you taking? I mean, why didn't your doctor say, okay, let's go to the next? Because usually there's a progression. They start out with prednisone. They try to hit it hard. They try to get it under control. And you sort of try to maintain it. Typically, the next thing they go to would be methotrexate.
Which is what I was thinking I was going to have to start. That's what we were talking about.
Why the doctor didn't tell you to take methotrexate. Did they just feel like, okay, we beat it, we hit it hard with the prednisone, and we knocked it out?
I don't think anybody thinks we knocked it out. But I think because it's not impacting my life in a huge enough way that I'm not a medicine person. I'm like, right. Give me the right foods, give me exercise, give me enough sleep. It's a lot for me to even take a Tylenol. So, yeah.
All right. No, I get that.
I'm sure I could be on something if I pushed for it. I don't know that I want to be right now.
Well, I get that. And you've got, again, and I refer to myself a lot just because, I know my situation and certain people, like if you've got cardiac sarcoidosis, you cannot afford, and I've got it on my spinal cord, you can't afford to have a flare because every time you have a flare, it is a potentially not just discomfort, but life-changing or, in cardiac life-ending situation because you can't have a heart valve get clogged up with more granulomas or have permanent damage on a heart valve. When you have it in your lungs, you've got a little bit of leeway, and it's a little bit, not a lot, but you don't want your lungs completely clogged up with this stuff. So you can have a little bit of a flare. On the other hand, if it is in your eye and you have a flare and there's permanent nerve damage, I've had people on the podcast, who've lost vision in the eye. Yeah. So you don't know. And I feel like you're walking on a tightrope right now.
I do too. Yeah. And I'm a kind of person who used to skip routine medical care, go years without checking in and getting the right tests and getting a physical and all of that. This has been a huge wake-up call for me, and I do not miss a single appointment that's related to my sarcoidosis. I do not miss an eye appointment. I do not miss a pulmonologist appointment. I don't miss a cardiologist appointment. And I actually even see my primary care for annual physicals, which is something I had not done for a long time. So, and I check in with myself a lot. I know how I feel. And I actually am feeling better than I have felt in years right now. So yes, the tightrope, but also, wow, this is great. I'm going to go with this. I'm going to do the things that I need to be doing professionally and personally, and making sure I'm keeping up with my walking and trying to eat good food and not have too much ice cream and, and kind of a food is medicine approach, healing from the inside out and just doing good things for myself. And if I don't have to go the medication route, I definitely don't want to. Maybe there's a little trauma in there from that prednisone experience. I don't know.
You're listening to the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast, and today we're talking with Laura Ward, who joins us from Connecticut, and she is talking about her battle with sarcoidosis. And Laura, I want to know a little bit more about you. We've learned that you've practiced public relations professionally, but you are a mother, correct?
Yes, I am. I have an 18-year-old son and a 16-year-old daughter.
Okay. And your son's in college?
He just started his freshman year of college.
That's exciting, right?
It's super exciting. He was so ready for this next phase of his journey. And it's been really awesome to watch him spreading his wings in the short, 3 weeks he's been there. But
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And is he going to college there in New England, or where did he go off to school?
Yeah, he's here in New England, and he's a little over an hour away. So, and he's an athlete. So I'm excited to be able to watch his sports competitions. He's a lacrosse player. So we'll be able to get to his games in the spring because it's a local-ish school.
Uh-huh.
And so that's a really good feeling.
Great. And then your daughter's in high school.
She's a junior in high school, and she dances competitively, and she's just starting to look at colleges. So, yeah, it's been a wild ride with both of them, and I wouldn't change a minute of it. It's just been so good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know that, I've got three grown sons. My baby will be turning 30 this year, and I've got 7 grandkids now. And you're in for a treat when that part of life comes around, let me tell you. But so how did sarcoidosis affect your life with your family? Because all of a sudden mom is sick.
I slowed way down, and I started asking for help. And I'm not good at asking for help at all. I'm, super independent, fix it all myself. My dad taught me how to use all the different kinds of tools growing up. So,
Really?
I've been handy and self-sufficient. Super, super happy to have my amazing husband as my life partner, in all the things, from parenting to household to everything. But I started letting other people do things. Somebody else can vacuum the house today, just not feeling it. And we have a dog who has a lot of hair, so vacuuming happens more frequently than once a week around here. And just giving myself more space to make sure I was okay, because I was tired in the beginning when this was flared up and overwhelming, and stress certainly exacerbated symptoms. I knew how to listen to my body, and that was a very quick learning experience for me. And I don't know how I figured it out so quickly, but it was very obvious that this wasn't a push through it situation. There are always things we can push through. There are. And I've heard you or one of your guests describe it as kind of like the beginning of the day, there's a battery and it's going to run out. I think that's how it was described.
Yeah. Yep.
And sometimes that battery has more juice depending on the day. And it's kind of having a sense of how charged up that battery is each and every day, and deciding what you're going to do with the power you have. And interestingly for me, as all of this was starting, my career was shifting. I had been a solo public relations consultant with a handful of clients I was working with directly. I didn't have any employees. It was just me and the organizations I was working for. And it was kind of organically coming to an end, which was weird in terms of timing. Just contracts weren't getting renewed, and it was going away. And I said, okay, well, I'm about to be battling some, and at that point I wasn't cancer. What is this going to be? But medical crisis situation, right? Maybe I just let this go. Maybe I don't fight for this. And about a year prior to that, I had gotten my certification as an addiction and life coach, addiction recovery and life coach, something based on my personal battle with alcohol use disorder, and having been public about my story to find freedom from alcohol for me, and having people reach out to me and say, oh my gosh, that's me too. Can you help me? Right. And I realized I had was my experience, right, and I needed some sort of credentialing if I wanted to help anybody, whether paid or not. I didn't feel right.
You wanted to say the right things.
Say the right things. Yeah. And I knew that it was more than just what my journey had been like. Certainly my experience helps me a ton because I can relate on so many levels to people who are also going through the same thing. But to truly, be an effective coach, I highly believe in credentialing and with reputable organizations, because there's a lot out there. Anybody can be a coach of anything, with very little training or money invested. So
yes, you got to be careful. Yep.
I wanted to make sure I was doing it right. So I had gotten that credential and had been kind of coaching alongside my PR consulting business, and decided, okay, I'm going to go all in on coaching now, since things seem to be, and it was great because I could do it at my own pace. I could build it the way I wanted to. It was a nice fit with having time to manage family responsibilities and make sure I was taking the best care of myself. This was in the prednisone days, where I wasn't sleeping very well and I was eating too much and I just felt like I was popping out of my skin. And I was snapping at family members, and I usually pretty nice.
Right. Well, prednisone will do that.
Calm about things. So,
yeah.
So I think it was an adjustment period in terms of just my life changing in a lot of ways, and me trying to keep the family stuff consistent. I didn't want my kids to feel like things had to be different in any way, even though I was asking for a little more support from them with stuff like, hey, guys, normally I'd run this load of laundry, but could one of you do it? And it's great because they know how to do laundry.
It's great that they recognize that you weren't feeling well, that you weren't just being, quote unquote, lazy, that there was really something going on there with you, and they stepped up. So congratulations, you had those kinds of kids. That's really important. So I want to get back to you and sarcoidosis. So you said you walk 100 miles a month?
In a good month.
Right.
In a good month. I have on months and off months, but
right.
But on the good months, it's about 100. Yeah.
100. So do you try to walk every day, or do you every other day? How do you do that?
I try to walk 5 times a week, whether it's Monday through Friday or an every other day type of situation. I enjoy walking outdoors more than indoors, so the weather plays a part in that. But I do have a block on my schedule. It is actually there. It says "Mom Walk," and the kids can see it too. They know that's in there.
And it's, you don't bug Mom during that time. That's it.
And that's it. We've got a great trail system nearby. It runs along the Farmington River, which is beautiful. And I'm a bird person. I don't know them all, but I love to watch birds, especially herons. So, and for me, that's a huge part of my self-care and what I do for myself from a health perspective. My lungs feel heavier when I'm not working them out. And that could even be part of what contributed to my not so happy pulmonary function test earlier this year. I hadn't been walking as much as I am used to, and maybe my lungs were just not where they're supposed to be because they hadn't been getting worked out.
Right. That pulmonary function test is where you get on the treadmill and they measure all your vital statistics, and they make it go harder and harder and harder until you stop.
That's a stress test, I think.
Stress test.
The pulmonary function test is just a breathing test. You sit in a chair, and there is a tube that comes over and goes in your mouth, almost similar to a scuba diving regulator.
Yep, I've done that. Yep.
And there are a few different rounds of things that you need to go through in terms of breathing in quickly and holding it and then blasting it out, or breathing in more slowly and then doing a longer exhale. And it takes about 20 to 30 minutes. Yeah. And I don't get into the numbers. I just let them tell me if I'm good or if I'm not good. And up until April this year, there'd never been any concern with those tests for me, which is really remarkable. So that's always been That's always been really reassuring. And then in April with the one that wasn't as good. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't as good.
Wasn't as good. Well, not walking could definitely make a difference with that, because I know with my workouts, if I lay off, I'm not as good as when I'm working out. So, and for me, that means basically riding a bike. In the off season, I do lift some weights and that kind of stuff and work out with a trainer. But pulmonary wise, yeah, I can see my resting heart rate change and all these other things change when I'm not working out as much. And that's also for me weather related. So I can understand that. Yeah. Well, so back to your sarcoidosis, you are now so you are in actual remission, because remission is when you have no symptoms and you're taking no drugs. And a lot of people are having those symptoms, but that's because they're controlled by drugs. So that's not called remission. You're actually in remission. What are you doing to maintain that? I mean, I know you're eating well, but I guess my question is, what are you doing to make sure that all of a sudden it doesn't come roaring back?
And the list is short, right? What can we do to make sure? Because
just keep an eye on it.
Just, checking in with myself and knowing how I'm feeling. And I think what's interesting is that you can be in remission, but you can still sometimes feel it. I still get fatigued pretty easily. I have not had fevers and joint aches the way I used to get in the different flares that I would have from time to time. I think certainly if I threw a fever or, suddenly just felt like my bones were popping out of my skin, that would be a sure sign to me that something's not right. In fact, I had COVID for the first time in June. And at first I thought, am I having a flare? And then quickly realized, no, this is not sarcoidosis related. And
so are you relieved or happy that when you find out it's COVID, it's like, oh no, it's just COVID, it's not sarcoidosis? What was your reaction?
Well, I mean, I'm vaccinated and double boosted. I got my second booster because we thought I was going to be starting methotrexate. My doctor said to me, we're about to destroy your immune system. So yeah, go get that second booster. And so got COVID through both of those, I think, from high school graduation. But there's always some relief in being able to put a finger on what it is that's going on, whether it's COVID or the flu or anything diagnosable. I feel like at least it's a thing and people might know what to do about it. I was surprised that I had gone so long without getting it. And I was very, very lucky that it was a fairly mild case, although I did lose my taste and smell. But I got through it really well for somebody who's got something going on in her lungs. So I was very, very relieved and very encouraged by, I attribute that to the work of the vaccine and the boosters. So I think, I don't know if I was relieved that it was COVID, but I'm grateful for the extra antibodies now and, being able to delay the new booster a little bit longer.
There you go. Right.
But I try to do the best I can with what I put into my body. I also really love sugar. So it's a struggle. I've heard you talk about cookies and birthday cake.
Yes.
So I know how that feels.
Yes.
And, hydration is super important. I focus on 100 ounces of water a day. 100, I guess, is my number. 100 miles a month and 100 ounces of water a day.
Wow, that's a lot.
And getting rest. I used to be a night owl. I could be the person who stayed up late getting work done because that was a nice quiet time in the house. And I don't let myself do that anymore. I think I'm really good at creating boundaries between work and personal and just giving myself space. And sometimes I feel lazy. Sometimes I absolutely feel lazy when I'm sitting on the sofa at night watching TV instead of reading a book or returning emails or, something else I could be doing. But I've learned not to beat myself up too hard about it. And so, what can I do to make sure it doesn't come back or get worse or flare? Try to make the best choices I can make for myself every day from a stress and health and nutrition standpoint. But ultimately, our bodies are going to do what they do. And I just hope that mine decides to keep riding this wave, because it's been pretty good.
Laura, thank you for joining me here on the podcast today.
You're welcome, John. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share my story. It was really fun hanging out with you.
I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling.
Thanks again to Laura for reaching out and sharing her story. I want to congratulate her for being 8 years alcohol-free and, of course, for being steadfast in her fight with sarcoidosis. Let's hope it stays in remission and that she is one of the lucky ones for whom sarcoidosis just goes away on its own. A couple of reminders: the official Sarc Fighter song called Zombie by Mark Steyer and his band, the White Hot Lizards in Alberta, Canada. You can hear Mark's story because he is a fellow Sarc fighter, as I said, and that's the story behind the lyrics, and that's way back in episode 12. He reached out to me and said, John, I just found your podcast. I've written a song about sarcoidosis. Why don't you give it a listen? I did. He came on the podcast, and he agreed to let Zombie be the official Sarc Fighter song, and I am so appreciative of that. And occasionally I will play the entire song for you at the end of an episode, and I'm feeling like I'll do that at the end of this episode. So if not, if I forget or something happens, life intervenes, I know you can go back to episode 41. It's there. And those lyrics are so haunting to those of us with sarcoidosis. I release the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast every other Monday. As I'm speaking today, my trusty dog Dougal is curled up on the chair in my office. Dougal makes my life so much better. Don't forget to follow the Sarc Fighter on social media. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, as I mentioned. If you ever ride your Peloton, you can follow me as hashtag Sarc Fighter. And my cycling blog, Carlin the Cyclist, has a section called Cycling with Sarcoidosis, where I detail some of the issues I've had with continuing to try to ride my bike through this diagnosis and the medications. If you're new here, you're just trying to figure out what sarcoidosis is, try listening to episode 2 with Dr. Simon Hart, one of the most listened to episodes, and he just goes over sarcoidosis 101. What is it? How does it affect you? What's it look like in your body? What we do and don't know about the causes and the treatments for sarcoidosis. All of that is right there with Dr. Simon Hart, who joined me all the way from the UK. My story is episode 1. The backstory to the founding of the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research, FSR, is episode 11 with Andrea and Redding Wilson. Andrea is a fellow Sarc fighter, and they founded FSR at their kitchen table. Send me an email. It's in the show notes, carlinagency@gmail.com. Follow the Sarc Fighter on Instagram and Facebook. And please, it helps me reach more people and grow the show if you would just share it on your social media. So grab the link and push it out there on your social media. And if you like it, more than anything, just tell one person here in the sarcoidosis space. Say, hey, the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast really helps me. Maybe it would help you. Give the show a nice review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, keep fighting.
Easier to grieve if I had a breath to breathe. I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling. walking, trying to keep up the pace. Dead man walking, counting down his days. And I don't know what will come. Look for silver linings, but still I find none. There was potential, slipping gone. It feels torrential, but I'm holding on. I'm holding on. I'm holding on. The fear I fight every single night. Whoa, I'm still upright. Find a way to try and adapt your life. It's not the why, but the how that plagues my mind. A new perspective, appreciate what you've got. We're dead men walking, in an instant it could be gone. And I don't know what will come. Look for silver linings, but still I find none. There was potential, slipping gone. It feels torrential, but I'm holding on. I'm holding on. I'm holding on. The fear I fight every single night. Whoa, I'm still upright. Wherever there is happiness, fight to be there too. And wherever there are friendly smiles, try hard to smile too. And wherever there is sunshine, don't let fear darken you.